All right. Well, today I'm going to talk a little bit about the cybersecurity technical requirements for internal auditors. So, recently, with some of the changes in the standards, the IIA has started issuing, or what they're planning to issue, is technical requirements. The first one is on cybersecurity, and I know they're asking for feedback from people. So, I put in the link if you'd like to give your feedback to the IIA about them. The main consternation, if you will, is that they are uh, making them mandatory as opposed to just guidance, which means for most people, again, if you're going to follow all of the IIA standards, those would be things that you would have to do in that particular way. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit about why I think that actually is a step back into the dark ages for internal audit, and some of the feedback that I'm getting from chief audit executives and what I would do if I were, again, a chief audit executive in an organization. Because this is one of those things that there's been a public outcry, at least here on LinkedIn and emails and things I know that are going back, where a lot of the members of the IIA are saying, no, we think this is a bad idea. Guidance is fine, mandatory, no way, right? But for whatever reason, nobody seems to be listening. And even when a vast majority of the people are saying this is not a good idea. At least everything I'm hearing is they're planning to still go forward with it. So now the choice is up to the heads of internal audit, what you're going to do about it. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that in this video as well. Okay, so why I think this is a bad idea? Well, first off, it's, you're requiring people, and effectively, as I said, moving back into the dark ages. So again, these, at least the first one that's been put out on cybersecurity, appears to be almost like a standard work program, pretty much telling you exactly what you need to do to audit cybersecurity. Now, a couple of problems with that. First off, if you're taking a risk-based approach, you don't necessarily want to consistently audit cybersecurity the same at every organization, because the context is different, the tools that are being used are different, the people in place are different, the control environment is different, and therefore each organization needs to determine exactly how they're going to do it without these prescribed rules that are being put out there. Okay. And, again, that goes back to more of a risk-based approach. In some organizations, cyber risk is probably pretty well handled. And so there may not even be much of a need for internal audit to do a lot of work there if there's already, good controls in place and good monitoring by a second line function. Okay. Now, why that is the dark ages? Well, again, the IIA is saying that it's for consistency. It's for consistency, right? So everybody does things consistently. Well, I'll tell you, that's not how the world works. Okay. Every organization is different. And because of that, right, you cannot have consistency in every single thing that you do. The other thing is, again, by putting it out in effectively kind of a work program format, we're going back to the days of when there were standard work programs. Now, again, if you're doing a risk-based internal audit approach, you shouldn't be using standard work programs. You may use them as a basis for kind of thinking about some different testing steps that you might do, but it would be very unwise to just copy and paste a standard work program. Even in public accounting, we got away from that 25, 30 years ago and stopped using standard work programs. A lot of the people in internal audit have stopped using standard work programs if they were doing a risk-based approach. Okay. And so going back to that is just a mistake in my opinion. Okay. Now, another reason why this kind of throws you back into the dark ages, and again, I am not a cybersecurity expert, but I have heard from people who are, that have gone through and have looked at the things that are included, and they're pretty basic, or some of them are even off the mark. Now, some of you may be saying, well, but we need some sort of guidance on cybersecurity. It's a big risk area. It's an area that we need to audit. I totally agree with you. But the IIA is not the best organization in the world to provide you with some technical guidance on cybersecurity. There are plenty of other organizations out there like NIST and CIS, and there's a whole bunch of other firms and organizations that actually do cyber all the time. Those are resources that internal audit can use when developing their audit. And those are the resources, in my opinion, that you should probably be using instead. They're going to be more current. They're going to be more technically accurate. And so, again, if I were in the CAE role today, that's where I would be using. I would be looking at things like, the CIS controls and cyber stuff from some of these other organizations instead of relying on what the IIA is putting out. Now, another thing with that is that because some of the people in cyber have been so critical of the things that are put in here, here's what I'm afraid is going to happen. Is some people in internal audit are just going to blindly apply the technical requirements the way the IIA puts them out. Now, when you do that, and then you go into your organization, people are going to laugh at you. People are going to think you don't know what you're talking about. And I don't want that to happen. Okay, that's one of the reasons why I am doing this video today that may be a little critical, but it's because I want to protect you. I want to protect internal audit from people making fun of you. Okay. So that's another downside to these things being mandatory, being very standard and prescriptive in their nature, is that unfortunately a lot of people are going to do internal audits around cyber and probably completely miss the mark or not truly address the risks associated with their particular organization. And that can be disastrous for you in your career. But also can be disastrous for the the respect and of internal audit in your organization as well. Okay, and we already struggle enough with some of those things. Now, again, let's just say again, these are going to probably come out and be mandatory. And so, if you're in that situation, what do you do, right? And that's a question that has come up a lot in the Audit Leader Forum. And so I put a link in the description to that as well. We've talked about this many times. We're going to continue to talk about it, I'm sure, in future meetings as well. And what are people actually going to do? And what would I do if I were in that chair again? Okay. Now, most of the chief audit executives I talk to are probably not going to follow them to the letter of the law. And so here's where, people have to decide what is best for your organization. There are some CAEs who are thinking they're going to do probably most of it, and then they're going to document why they didn't do the rest. So it's a big administrative time to do that, but that's what some are choosing to do. Right? Take the good and then document why you're not doing some of the other things. Okay? Because there's a documentation requirement that, again, is just really silly. Anyway, so that's what some are choosing to do. Some are choosing to, not really follow them at all. Right? And actually, I've had a lot of people that are even questioning following the new standards. And are probably going to have or starting to have discussions with their board about things like, look, we're going to use the standards from the profession that we think makes sense, and we're not going to use the other things. So if we get an outside QAR, you're going to probably see them saying we're not following certain standards, and we're not, and here's the reason why. Okay. Now, I know when I say that, a lot of you that are out there listening to this may be aghast, like, "Oh, well, no, we're internal audit. We have to follow all the rules." Well, you don't have to follow the rules that were created by a professional organization that doesn't seem to listen to its members. Okay. Again, that's a voluntary compliance thing. And so let me just talk about this briefly when it comes to compliance. There's voluntary compliance requirements and there's involuntary requirements in compliance. Okay. Things that you have to comply with are things like laws and regulations, right? Those are put into law, they're regulation. You don't have a choice over them. But there are a lot of voluntary compliance things that organizations choose to do. So you can choose to follow an ISO standard. Nobody tells you you have to do that unless it's promulgated by law or regulation, but they choose to do it. It's voluntary. Okay. And so for all chief audit executives, the standards, the IIA standards, the technical requirements, anything that got put out there is a voluntary requirement. You choose whether you're going to follow it or not follow it. That's the decision of the CAE. And again, for my opinion, having been in that situation before as a chief audit executive several times, this is not new. So something similar to this happened about probably 25 years ago when I was sitting in the seat, and we had the debate over whether or not we were going to get an external review. The IIA put in a requirement that to follow the standards, you had to get an independent assessment of your function. Now, there's a whole reason and political and backstory for that I'm not going to get into today. But they pushed for it, they put it in place, which meant if I was going to say that I was following all of the IIA standards, I had to get an external review. And so I remember having the discussion at that time with other heads of internal audit. And many of us chose not to get an external review and to not, quote unquote, follow all of the IIA requirements. We chose to do that because we didn't see that it added value for our organization. Yes, it may add value in the esteem and ego of the profession, but it didn't do anything for my company, right? And so I couldn't justify spending $50,000 having somebody come in to tell me what I already knew. Okay. And my board agreed with me on that. Okay. So again, we fast forward now, it's the same kind of situation, just a different thing. And again, some of you might be sitting there thinking, well, what am I supposed to do? They're mandatory. I have to follow them. I'm a member of the IA. I have my CIA. What am I supposed to do? Again, it's voluntary. You can choose to do it or choose not to do it. And really, the only repercussion is you can't put a line in your audit reports to say, we audited in accordance with the IIA standards, which honestly, I don't know anybody that actually puts those in their reports anyway. So, not a big deal if you choose not to follow it. Now, if you're the head of audit, again, you have to be communicating this and having discussions about this with your executives and with your board, but they're very easy discussions to have. Okay. It goes very similar to the ones that I had back in the day when we were talking about external reviews, which goes something like this. Hey, CEO. Hey, audit committee. The IIA just changed some of their standards. They're requiring these technical requirements in certain areas. I don't agree with them. I don't agree with the guidance that they're giving. I don't think that they serve our organization. I think they're going to create a lot of administrative time for my staff just to document and do paperwork on it. And I don't think it's right that we spend company resources doing that. I would rather spend the company resources doing risk-based audits on the areas that you want us to do. And I'm not going to be so concerned about the documentation and the ticking and the tying and our work papers to satisfy the professional organization. Now, when you say, and again, that's generalities. And again, you have to know what's best for you. But here's what I'm going to tell you. If you have those kind of discussions with your executives and your board, they're going to nod their head and say, Jason, I agree with you. Let's not waste any money doing things that we don't need to do. Okay. It's a pretty simple discussion to have, but it's a discussion that you have to have. Now, for some organizations, these voluntary compliance requirements may become more required. That is, if your regulators are pushing you to do it. And again, if I'm sitting in the seat, I'm going to push back on the regulators to begin with and see if I can push back and make them stop. If not, if I still have to do it, then again, you have to explain that to the board. But anyway, I wanted to come on here today because I know this came up today again in my LinkedIn feed and talk about it, because I know a lot of people on one way, they're like, hey, let the IA know what you're thinking. Well, I'm not going to waste my breath. I gave up my membership many years ago. And again, from all the back channeling and other things that I have done, I don't think that any of the comments are going to change a decision that has already been made, a decision that I disagree with, a decision that I believe puts internal audit more back into the dark ages, that I do not think is a good idea for the profession. But that's my opinion. You can disagree with me. That's fine. You can agree with me. I'm just trying to help, again, get the word out for people so that what you can actually do, and realize that these are a voluntary compliance item, and you get to choose whether you're going to follow them or not. Like I said, there are some challenges with it. In fact, I think one of the biggest ones is the respect for internal audit, because I think that a lot of the cyber people, when you try to audit using these guidelines or these requirements, are going to laugh at you and question why you're doing it this way. So with that said, I'm gonna stop for today, but that's the video for today. And again, if you are an audit leader who would like to talk about more of these kinds of things that are actually affecting you in your job, you'd like to know what other people are doing, you'd like to get some coaching and mentoring on what the best approach would be at your organization, that's what the Audit Leader Forum is all about. And like I said, I put a link to it in the description that you can go check out, or you can always reach out to me and I'm happy to share more information. So with that, I'm going to sign off for today, and we will see you on the next live video.